Growing up as someone who was raised on Nickelodeon shows such as SpongeBob and Ren and Stimpy, shows that primarily used comedy to keep their audiences entertained, it was no surprise that Sokka was my favorite character on Avatar: The Last Airbender. I mean, he was the one to tell all of the jokes and get himself into comedic situations not uncommon in the worlds of these other shows. He was the character that closely embodied that comedic tone that I was most familiar with. And in a show where there was a noticeable lack in comedy compared to what was common on the network, it was nice to know that I could always rely on Sokka for a laugh. So with this in mind, when recently going back to rewatch the series, I was a bit skeptical about Sokka and his place in the overall story. I was worried that in the midst of all of this fantastic world building and complex character arcs and development, he would just be this unfunny mess of a character that would interrupt all of the interesting events taking place just to crack a joke. But in a surprise turn of events, this wasn't the case. In fact, it was the exact opposite of what I expected. Sokka's arc was my favorite part of the series as a whole, which is a pretty impressive feat considering that pretty much every character is written to perfection. Allow me to explain. Sokka's first appearance in the show takes place on a boat, where he and his sister Katara attempt to catch a fish. And from this scene, we establish two key aspects of Sokka's character and how he views the world around him. The first being his lovable, comedic, yet egotistical personality. The line,
"Watch and learn, Katara. This is how you catch a fish,"
shows that he thinks highly of his skills and abilities. And judging by the look on Katara's face right after, we can assume that his skills might not be on the level that he thinks they are. This egotistical persona perfectly lends itself to tons of comedic opportunities, which the show capitalizes on in some of the funniest moments in the series. The second thing this scene introduces us to is Sokka's more deep and mature side. In the scene preceding this, we were shown a backstory narrated by Katara about how the Fire Nation successfully took over most of the world, including their village, and how their father, along with the other men in the tribe, set sail to the Earth Kingdom to help fight them, leaving Sokka and Katara to help protect what's left of their home. Immediately, it is made clear that Sokka and his sister have a huge weight on their shoulders, as they are left alone with the responsibility of safeguarding their home against those who wish to destroy it. And in the fishing scene, we get a great representation on the differing ways that Sokka and Katara approach the situations and obstacles thrown their way. The line,
"It's not getting away from me this time,"
implies that Sokka has tried to catch this fish many times, whereas Katara is able to catch the fish with no problem due to her ability to waterbend. And while Sokka passes her abilities off as freakish and unnatural, it still shows that she possesses an ability that is of better use to not just catching a fish, but protecting those around her. As he wasn't allowed to join the men to fight, Sokka feels that protecting his village is the only way that he'll gain admiration from his father and prove himself a capable leader. So Katara's ability to waterbend is a huge threat to Sokka's desire of acceptance from the army. And this journey of self-worth and relationship with bending is where Sokka's character arc comes into fruition. Bending is kind of a big deal in the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender, as the main story focuses on Aang trying to master all four elements in time to defeat the Fire Lord. And every character that accompanies Aang on his quest to pursue this task all have a hand in his mastery of the elements. This only adds to Sokka's struggle of self-worth, as he feels he is worthless in Aang's quest in mastering the elements, and desperately tries to be of use to the group instead of a bumbling idiot like he is usually portrayed. We learn that this comedic and larger-than-life persona is used as a cover-up for his own insecurities of not only his own self-worth, but his worth to the group as a whole. And the few instances where the show focuses on this internal struggle are some of the greatest moments in the series. A prime example of this comes from the episode The Day of Black Sun, where we see most of the allies that the group has made over the course of the series join together in an attempt to defeat the Fire Nation during a solar eclipse. You see, early in season 2, Sokka goes into a secret library in the desert and discovers that the ability to firebend gets disabled during a solar eclipse, which just so happens to be occurring in the near future. And the series up to this point has been hyping up this invasion hard. We see Sokka and the gang train extra hard, prepare battle strategies, looking for all the help they can get because, as far as they can tell, this invasion could potentially end the Fire Nation's rule once and for all. And this is all because of Sokka's discovery. Not Katara's, not Toph's, not even the Avatar himself, but Sokka. He's finally found his purpose and his place in the group. And over time, we start to see Sokka's knowledge in battle and his capabilities as a leader. He's the mastermind for what could potentially be the end of a 100-year war. Then the day of the invasion finally comes. All of the soldiers are ready to go, fully prepared, with Sokka leading the army to what could potentially be the end of the Fire Nation. And everything looks pretty promising in the beginning. The Fire Nation walls are destroyed, the soldiers and tanks are able to hold their ground against the onslaught of Fire Nation soldiers, and Aang quickly makes his way to the Fire Lord's palace. Everything seems to be going according to plan. But unfortunately, things start to go wrong very quickly. First, Sokka's father gets injured in the battle, causing a sudden shift in leadership. Then we find out that Aang is unable to find the Fire Lord anywhere because it turns out that the Fire Nation is aware that they lose their abilities during the eclipse and put the Fire Lord away in a secret bunker where nobody could find him. And to make matters worse, Azula is there when the gang attempts to look for him. They get into a fight, and just when you think that they're about to stop and search for the Fire Lord, this happens.
So, Sokka's your name, right? My favorite prisoner used to mention you all the time. She was convinced you were going to come rescue her. Of course, you never came, and she gave up on you.
Sokka falls for the trap and uses up all of their time. The eclipse is over and the firebending comes back, causing everybody except for our young heroes to surrender. What was supposed to be Sokka's big moment of victory, his chance to prove that he was of worth to everyone, gone. And as much as everyone tries to reassure him that it wasn't his fault and that everything is gonna be fine, I can only imagine the amount of grief and pain that Sokka must have felt during that moment. How many more innocent lives were taken because he failed to defeat the Fire Lord? And yet, this is the character that we're supposed to laugh at. The character that gives the show its comedic nature in the midst of a slew of mature and grounded moments. And it may seem like, from that description, Sokka is this super complex character with tons of time devoted to his development, but that's really not true. Katara's vengeance against the Fire Nation, Aang's internal struggle of leaving his people to die, Zuko's redemption, those are the ones that are given the big treatment. Not to suggest that they're bad in any way, far from it. I think they're about as close to perfection as TV gets. But what I love so much about Sokka is the fact that his arc, in the grand scheme of things, isn't focused on as much. That he's mostly, on the surface, your typical comic relief character. There's a duality to Sokka that I love, one where on the surface lays a cocky, boastful, and egotistical buffoon, but is also someone with deep insecurities that tries to hide them with a confident persona. And the fact that the writers don't dwell on this arc much only adds to this character's more subtle growth and change. It's not a huge growth like what is typically seen in these types of series, rather a slow change that may not even be noticed by some of the viewers. I don't know, maybe I'm looking far too deep into this, but there's something about this young boy struggling to find his purpose in the midst of this epic fantasy that just really struck a chord with me. And if you're willing to take the time and see for yourself, hopefully it will for you too. Thanks for watching.